6 p.m. here in Korea. Welcome to the newscast. I'm Daniel Che. Let's start with the headlines. As more new MERS cases are confirmed in Korea, President Park Geun-hye calls an emergency meeting to discuss containment measures. Tensions are brewing between the presidential office and the ruling party over a revised law that gives the National Assembly the power to demand changes to government ordinances. And less than a week after being elected for his fifth term, Blatter announced his resignation as FIFA president, just as investigators close in on officials allegedly involved in receiving bribes from World Cup host countries. We start with the emergency meeting presided over by President Park Geun-hye in Korea on Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, or MERS, which has caused 2 deaths already here in Korea. Let's connect to our Connie Kim at the news center. Connie, could you tell us more about what was discussed at the meeting?
Well, Daniel, at the meeting attended by ministers and doctors, President Park called for containment measures and other ways of dealing with the outbreak.
그 환자의 치료와 또 그 처리 과정 및 감염 경로, 그다음에 치료 의사들의 그 어떤 이동 방향 이런 것에 대해서 좀 그 논의를 해야 되겠고, 또 그 이후에 그 접촉 환자의 그 진료 기관 또 진료 의사 등 그 환자들의 그 이동 경로가 어떻게 됐는가 하는 것을 이제 파악해 볼 필요가 있겠습니다.
There, President Park emphasized the need to prevent the further spread of the disease, including keeping track of people traveling in and out of MERS-infected countries, as well as ways to completely isolate MERS-infected patients from the general public. She vowed to create a team of health experts to devise measures to protect children and the elderly, the latter of which are more prone to the viral disease. And Daniel, this just coming in, the government has decided to create a controls tower to prevent the spread of the virus.
Okay, well, the numbers are staggering, Connie. 30 MERS cases have been confirmed so far. That figure could apparently rise quickly. Hundreds more are suspected of having contracted that virus. Could you give us more details on that?
Well, Daniel, Korea's health ministry says a total of 398 people are suspected of having contracted the disease, and 99 of them are currently being tested. Now, 5 new MERS cases were confirmed today. 4 of the 5 were in the same hospital ward as the first patient. One tertiary infection was confirmed in a 60-year-old man who shared the same hospital room with a patient whose case was confirmed earlier. And some unsettling news: 3 patients are reported to be in critical condition. However, 3 other confirmed MERS patients are set to be released from the hospital. Now, also, the person with MERS who traveled to Hong Kong has tested negative and is reported to be in stable condition. Now, currently, more than 1,300 people had direct contact with MERS patients, are isolated in their homes or in quarantine facilities to prevent the disease from spreading.
Well, it must be a nerve-wracking moment for them at the moment, but they do have a big and important role to play. Let's hope they listen to the authorities and stay home. Connie, how are the health officials viewing today's confirmation of another tertiary infection?
Daniel, health officials say there will not be indiscriminate tertiary transmission of the virus because all tertiary infections have come from the hospitals where patients infected with the virus were being treated. Take a listen to what one expert had to say.
Hospitals that are treating MERS patients prevent other people from entering those wards. Places other than these hospitals are virus-free.
Kim said, however, people should refrain from visiting someone who was diagnosed with MERS, even if they are in recovery. Now, another concerning issue as the number of confirmed MERS cases rises is that the country is running out of treatment facilities for new people infected with the virus. The 17 designated hospitals authorized to treat MERS patients have special containment wards capable of blocking the virus's spread. But these wards have a total of just 105 beds. Meanwhile, Korea is adding to its list of preventive measures. Reservists who have traveled to the Middle East or have had contact with a MERS patient will be allowed to delay their mandatory military training. And as another preventive measure, Korea has decided to temporarily close more than 200 schools, though officials say it's highly unlikely that young people will contract the virus if they avoid going near the hospital and wash their hands frequently. Now this week will be critical because the 14-day incubation period from the first person who contracted the virus is now up, so we'll have to continue to monitor the disease's progress here in Korea. Back to you.
Thank you so much for that, Connie. That was our Connie Kim giving us the latest on Korea's efforts to battle MERS outbreak here in Korea. Moving on to other stories. At the National Assembly, lawmakers from the two main rival parties are voicing concerns about the government's response to the MERS outbreak. On Wednesday, veteran lawmakers from the ruling Saenuri Party, including fifth-term lawmaker Lee Jae-oh and fourth-term lawmaker Sim Jae-chul, criticized the government for its lax response. The main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy also scolded the government. Party leader Moon Jae-in said the current crisis is a result of the administration's incompetence and noted that public distrust of the government is at an all-time high. Against this backdrop, lawmakers will question government officials next Monday about the outbreak. Health Minister Moon Hyung-pyo will be present to answer questions about the current situation and future plans. A new law that gives lawmakers the right to demand changes to government ordinances is stoking tensions between the ruling party and the presidential office. President Park Geun-hye is concerned that the law encroaches on the executive branch's power, and some party members have sided with her, but not all party members agree. Our Kim Young-gil has the details.
At a meeting of its Supreme Council on Wednesday, Saenuri Party Chairman Kim Moo-sung urged party members to avoid a collision with the presidential office over the new law and assured them there will be further discussion on the law.
The Saenuri Party should avoid confusion with the government and presidential office. Revisions to the law were first proposed by the opposition party, and discussions on the law will continue.
Some Supreme Council members say the new law violates the constitutional division of powers.
Articles 75 and 95 of the Constitution give the executive branch the right to review legislation, and the Parliament doesn't have the right to interfere with that. That's why this revised law is unconstitutional. This new parliamentary law could paralyze state affairs if the opposition continues to disregard the unconstitutionality of this law, and both parties will be held responsible.
The new law, which passed last week, gives the National Assembly the power to demand changes to government enforcement ordinances. Critics say this gives the Assembly too much say over government policy, which goes against the constitutional separation of powers. Meanwhile, the presidential office, which objects to the new law, lashed out at the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy over the revision. A presidential official said Wednesday that the party's floor leader Lee Jong-gol had disparaged the president the previous day, when he said President Park doesn't need to make a fuss over the new bill. Lee responded on Wednesday that he had no intention of insulting the president and urged the government to instead focus on dealing with the MERS crisis. Kim Young-gil, Arirang News.
Let's turn now over to the topic of national defense. With North Korea continuing to issue nuclear and missile threats, President Park Geun-hye checked up on South Korean military readiness. On a visit to the state-run Agency for Defense Development Testing Center Wednesday, the president observed the first test firing of a ballistic missile with a range of at least 500 kilometers. That means the missile, part of Seoul's preemptive strike kill chain system, can hit targets almost anywhere in North Korea. President Park urged researchers to ensure the safety of South Koreans by working hard to develop cutting-edge defense science and technology. The visit marks the first time a president has made an official trip to the research institute in 30 years. Today is a historic day for both the South Korean and the U.S. Army. The two allies celebrated the launch of a new combined division. Our Na Young-kyung takes us to that ceremony held at Camp Red Cloud just north of Seoul.
This signaled the beginning of a new organizational paradigm. For the first time in South Korean and U.S. history, a combined division was formed to bolster combat readiness against Pyongyang. The commanding general of the U.S. 2nd Infantry Division, which will lead the new combined unit, says today's event reflects much more than just a name change.
It serves as a signal to the world, and especially to our potential adversaries in particular, that we have made the transformation that is necessary to succeed on the battlefield.
The division will consist of a brigade from the South Korean Army and the U.S. 2nd Infantry Division, which is currently located in Uijeongbu, north of Seoul. The ceremony comes after the two allies agreed last year to form this unprecedented division. Dozens of South Korean officers were dispatched to the Joint Staff Office earlier in January for an integration training session to ensure a smooth transition. Members of the Korean Brigade will carry out their regular duties under the Korean chain of command in peacetime, but will work with the U.S. troops in times of war. The division will be led by the American commander, while his deputy will be from the Korean Army. Although the two countries have worked in a similar manner under the Katyusha program or the Korean augmentation to the U.S. Army, officials say this is different in that the new division will have commissioned and non-commissioned officers from the South Korean Army under the command of the U.S. 8th Army.
I firmly believe that the ROK and U.S. combined division will be a linchpin in maintaining peace and stability on the Korean Peninsula by deterring North Korea's provocations and firmly responding should they provoke.
The new unit, whose mission includes eliminating weapons of mass destruction in North Korea, will stay in Uijeongbu for now, but will eventually be relocated to Pyeongtaek by the end of next year in accordance with the U.S.-based relocation plan. 나현경, Arirang News.
In other news, the United States has once again emphasized that it's up to North Korea to take meaningful actions toward denuclearization. The U.S. State Department says the U.S. and its six-party partners, South Korea, China, Japan, and Russia, need to put more pressure on North Korea. Last week, the top nuclear envoys from the South Korea, the U.S., and Japan agreed to ratchet up pressure on Pyongyang to abandon its nuclear program. The South Korean and U.S. envoys also met separately with China's envoy in Beijing. The six-party talks aimed at ending the North's nuclear programs have been stalled since the late 2008. North Korea is demanding an unconditional resumption of talks, but Washington says Pyongyang must first demonstrate its sincerity to its denuclearization commitments. The South Korean government has warned more than a dozen firms operating at the inter-Korean Kaesong industrial complex that violated its directive to disregard North Korea's unilateral wage hike. The Unification Ministry said Wednesday that it issued the warning to 18 businesses that paid the increased March wages to the North Korean workers, and added 31 firms are also under review for similar infractions. The ministry had made clear the companies will be punished if they comply with North Korea's unilateral move. A South Korean official said Seoul plans to propose talks with Pyongyang in the coming days to try to resolve the wage tussle. Another major economic institution has cut Korea's growth forecast. The OECD slashed the country's growth outlook for this year to 3% from its previous forecast of 3.8%. The organization attributed the cut to the country's growing household debt and slow wage growth, both of which are denting consumer spending. It also cited the strong Korean won trend and slowing exports to China. The OECD also expects the global economy to lose steam, growing 3.1% this year, down 0.6 percentage points from its earlier forecast. It also estimated that the U.S. and China, the world's two largest economies, will show slower growth than earlier projections, while Japan is showing a small drop of 0.1 percentage points from 0.8%. Sepp Blatter has called time on his FIFA presidency, resisting calls for him to step down since the corruption and bribery scandal blew up last week. Blatter finally threw in the towel on Tuesday. His announcement came shortly after sources told media outlets in the U.S. that investigators are looking to build a case against Blatter himself. Our Son Jang-in reports.
In a stunning turn of events, Sepp Blatter announced his intent to resign at a news conference in Zurich on Tuesday. Speaking just 4 days after being re-elected for a fifth term in football's top job, the under-fire 79-year-old said the reforms he had tried to implement over the years had not been enough.
FIFA needs a profound overhaul. While I have a mandate from the membership of FIFA, I do not feel that I have a mandate from the entire world of football, including the fans, the players, and the clubs.
The announcement comes less than a week after U.S. federal agents arrested 9 FIFA officials and 5 marketing executives over allegations of corruption and accepting $150 million over the past 2 decades in bribes from World Cup host countries. It's not clear what triggered Blatter to suddenly call it a day so soon after winning 4 more years in office. But some sources have told U.S. media that Blatter may be implicated in the ongoing federal corruption probe after all. Blatter, who has been FIFA president since 1998, called for an extraordinary Congress to be held as soon as possible to elect a new president. FIFA officials say it will take at least 6 months to allow time for a proper election to replace him between December and March next year. Until then, Blatter is expected to continue to exercise his functions as FIFA president. 손정인, Arirang News.
And this is coming in after Seth threw in the towel. South Korea's Chung Mong-jun announced that he is considering throwing his hat in the ring to run for that vacant FIFA position. He seems like the right man for the job. He made the 2002 World Cup in Korea possible, and he did find the professional soccer league here in Korea. And now let's move on to other stories focusing on China. In that country, the rescue teams are racing against the clock to find survivors among the more than 400 people missing after a tourist boat capsized on the Yangtze River. Thousands of police, soldiers, and medical workers have been working throughout the night around the upturned hull in China's central Hubei province. More than 36 hours have passed now since the ship sank, but only 14 of the 456 people on board have been rescued. 3 people were pulled alive from the hull on Tuesday, but 7 people have been confirmed dead. Among the survivors are the captain and the chief engineer, both of whom have been detained by police for questioning, according to Chinese state media. Most passengers were elderly Chinese tourists on an 11-day cruise along the Yangtze River, Asia's longest river, and its famous Three Gorges region. That's all for now. Thank you for watching.